Riverbend Awareness Project.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast episode are solely those of the individuals participating and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Riverbend Media Group or the Riverbend Awareness Project, its affiliates, or its employees. It is important to note that the discussion presented is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified healthcare professionals for any medical concerns or decisions. The Riverbend Awareness Project is a product of Riverbend Media Group.
We kind of already touched on this a little bit, so if you want to talk about it a little bit more, or if you're like, I'm good, I got that covered. What kind of food safety standards do potatoes have to meet before they get to the grocery store?
So I think this is really interesting. I don't think most people realize, but anybody who has for human consumption anymore in the United States has what they call a GAP, which is you go through this audit with GAP. They look at everything you're doing in your operation. It's generally accepted agricultural practices or something like that, I think is what the acronym stands for. Or they have a Primus audit, which is the same kind of things. And you would think they would just come in and make sure that, you're doing things safely and that you might not, say have animals where you're handling food and things like that. Oh, no. They go through everything. They go through how you dispose of your antifreeze, where you put your used oil, what's your succession plan on your farm to make sure your farm will exist into the future. They come and they make you have to test every single one of your wells and your water sources on your farm. They come in and they will bring in an inspector and they watch your harvesting operations. So they have to come out while you're in harvest. They have to come out when you're planting. And then they have food inspectors where the food gets packaged. So and then they also have to take samples and they have to hold them for a certain amount of period to make sure that they didn't have any bacteria or anything growing on them. So I'm so glad we're not like cantaloupe or something, because they've had and lettuce have had listeria breakouts and things. And those can be very, very dangerous. So when you think about the food supply in America, we really are on the leading edge of making sure that our food products are safe and reliable so people don't necessarily worry where their food's coming from. I think they take it for granted what all goes into making that happen.
Yeah.
Well, and that's when they have food recalls, right? I remember a couple months back they had, or maybe a year ago, they had a recall on, I think it was lettuce. And I went to the store and all of it was gone. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then my roommate was like, oh, there was a recall because I don't remember if it was listeria or something else, some other bacteria that they found. And they're like, okay, we got to pull it all off because it's not safe anymore. So,
but I think you have to remember what all goes into that. So it used to be you just, you would ship something, you didn't mark it, didn't have a tag. Now they can go back to the very lot, to the very time, and then they can go back to when the plant was last cleaned out, and then they can pull everything back to that date rather than just everything in general. But then sometimes when they have some of those things, they're not sure exactly where the people got the food, and then they make everybody do food recalls.
Yeah. And
that food recall stuff gets to be very expensive for the companies that are selling it, growers and everybody. It really, you have to be really careful. And so you have all these steps. I remember we have a washing machine thing. As the potatoes are coming in, they go through this washer thing. And it's funny because you can tell who's been out in their backyard that's back to our farm, because they must have been chipping golf balls out there and they were finding golf balls in the water.
Oh, no.
Or my son-in-law one time, they found his phone. It came through, because he couldn't find his phone when they were in the harvest. Somehow he'd lost his phone, and then the phone comes out when they. So there's all kinds of ways, or a wrench that somebody leaves out in the field when they're fixing a piece of equipment that's broken as they're harvesting. And so there's lots of steps in the process to make sure that does not get into our food supply.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Weird random things that pop up in places.
Yeah.
When we did this for it was National Energy Month, we went to one of the power plants, and the stuff that they pull off of the dams, a couple times a year, they'll find mannequins in the river, just weird stuff like that.
Weird stuff. Absolutely. Yeah.
I wouldn't think of. It's crazy.
That's pretty crazy.
I mean, in some of the food audits and things you have to do, part of it is you can't have glass light bulbs anymore. If they do, they have to have a screen on them. You can't have any glass anywhere where you will be storing food. So if we have employees, we spend hours training them and they have to sign off that they've been trained. We have to make sure they wash their hands when they go to the bathroom before they come back, even to work harvest, even with gloves on. You got to make sure that they're washing hands.
Yeah.
You got to make sure, like I say, that there are no food wrappers. You actually they drive around the edges of your field. So people that think that it's okay to drive down the road and throw out their trash next to a farmer's field, they can actually cause them problems with their gap audits if they find trash and stuff around the sides of their fields. So it becomes dependent upon all of us to make sure we're good stewards all the way around. Because if somebody's going to lose their accreditation, if you will, or their certifications for this, everybody needs to be aware that there's a real challenge with that. And so we're very conscientious about where things get thrown out. You can't have just any old bottles and junk and, anything. You have to make sure you're paying attention to what's going on around your farm all the time.
Yeah. How did Mickelsen's farm go about growing different parts of your business?
So I think we kind of, in the introduction, I talked about it a little bit, but what we did is we started out with what we could afford, and our attitude or our motto was always we wanted to stay out of debt as much as possible. And so we always paid cash for our equipment, and we would be willing to get mortgages for the farms themselves. And then, of course, you had operating lines, but you always wanted to make sure that you weren't using them. In fact, when we first started, our interest rate on our operating lines were like 9%. And then we were so excited when they got down to like 7%. We thought that was fantastic, And in the last few years, they've been so cheap that we haven't even known what to do. But we tried to position ourselves so that when opportunities came along, we could take advantage of those opportunities. So there's been times when somebody has decided they're going to retire. And Mark, my husband, has done a really great job of cultivating relationships. So people will come to him and say, hey, I'm thinking about being done farming, will you buy my farm? And that was the way some of the first farm buys started. And then there were other times when their business was going to auction in a bankruptcy, and we would buy it in a bankruptcy, but then we would take the farmer whose farm it was, and he would come and work for us. Because my husband, he just is really kind, and he just would make sure that those people, because, sometimes these things are out of your control, like the price. We are price takers. We are not price makers. And I think we really understand how critical that is. And so we grew, and we would just take steps, and then we would kind of catch up to our growth. One of the things that we had happen that really kind of hurt us was we had the federal government came in and declared the Pelsis nematode down in the Shelley area. And I
worked on that project.
Yeah, and we got tied into it by an association, a field, 1 year, one time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kept thinking we were going to get out of it. And we were. And then the federal government would change the regulations, and then they'd bring us back in again. And literally it took them from the fall in November till the spring in March just to wash our equipment one time. And then they're like, we literally could not cross a road without them coming to wash our equipment.
To come and steam clean everything.
Yeah, and we could just see the writing on the wall for us that we would be forever farming with the federal government looking over our shoulder, and it was not a fun thing to go through. We thought the federal government was going to put us out of business. So we did file a lawsuit against the feds. It took us 3 times as much money as we thought it was going to take, and 3 or 4 years, but we finally prevailed on parts of our lawsuit. And in that time, it allowed us the opportunity to sell out that farm and move to where it was better for us to be. And then we've taken some opportunities and we've traded farms. My husband always had the motto, he always had certain things, like he wanted to be Y2K aluminum free. He didn't want to be moving pipe anymore because he could see that we couldn't find employees. So that was one of our goals. Another one was that we wouldn't necessarily increase in acres, but that our ground would be the best ground we could get. So you started off with really deep wells on our farms, and that's expensive because lots of pumping costs with that. And so we would trade and move into better farms. And then as additional opportunities, we would sell or trade those farms for better farms. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting. Our banker says he hasn't seen anything like it. Most farmers always hold on to their original ground. we don't have any of our original farms other than the original homestead that Mark's granddad had years ago.
Oh, wow.
100 years ago. Other than that, we have none of the original farms we had even 30 years ago or 25 years ago. So we've been more nimble probably than most farms, but we've taken opportunities. And then we had an opportunity at one point. We had a farmer that wanted us to come. He wanted to kind of retire or sell out. And so that gave us an opportunity to expand our warehouses. We had one in Rigby, and then we were able to move to Hamer. The one in Rigby, we started out our original warehouse. We sold it, built a new warehouse, and we'd only been in it less than a year, and it had a fire and burned it to the ground. So then it kind of put us out of business on the packing side for a full year while we built another warehouse. So you had two warehouses back to back that were brand new, but one of them had burned down, and then you ended up with the second one. But we've tried to kind of maximize opportunities, and I think part of being able to maximize opportunities has come from being good neighbors and good people within our farm community that we wanted to help and share and give to others too. And I think that allowed us opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have had otherwise. I think it's been interesting, we grew from this 1 county footprint to the 5 or 6 county footprint, 1 warehouse to 2 warehouses. We also, before we got the second warehouse, we actually had started a potato processing facility where we would make fresh mashed potatoes. And that allowed us an opportunity to have an outlet for our processed potatoes. We did sell that out last year, had a really great opportunity and offer we really couldn't turn down. So we went ahead and sold that, but we still have our 2 potato packing facilities for our fresh potatoes, which is really what our business is. So we market to restaurants and stuff up and down the East Coast through food service groups. So I think that's, kind of our story. And then, like I say, we grew into the growing our own seed because my husband was always trying to figure out where he could save $1 here or $1 there and how that would exponentially make things better. And then he has our 2 sons they brought in, and he taught them how to kind of do the same thing. And it's so interesting to watch them kind of, launch from that great foundation they got from their dad about how to do this the right way. And they're very focused. They know you have to grow the best crop for the least amount of inputs and, with the highest yields you can possibly get out of it.
That's impressive. Thanks for sharing. That's really cool. Are there misconceptions about farming and agriculture that you would like to address or talk about?
I think if I had to say a couple of the misconceptions, I think it goes back to this thing that we're spraying all these fertilizers and chemicals on our ground and, that our food supply is unsafe. It's unfortunate that you'll get somebody out on social media that really does not know anything, but because they have influence, they can really cause damage very quickly to a food sector or a food industry. And it's important for people to actually go to the farmers or go to these places, look and see what they do, see how they take care of stuff. Chemicals and stuff, for example, or plant protection, whatever you want to call it, has changed so much in 38 years. You used to put gallons and gallons of stuff, and you couldn't have anybody in the fields for hours and hours.
Yeah.
And now it's literally like ounces to the acre versus gallons and gallons to the acre. And I don't think people realize it's so much safer. And the chemicals that they had 38 years ago versus today,
they're a lot different.
A lot different. And the other part of it is if we allow trial lawyers, and I'm on one today about that, but if you allow trial lawyers to do class action lawsuits and stuff, when everybody's worked with the best available science, the best available information, and then you start having that, you're going to interrupt the next generation of plant protection things that can happen that will make it so our food continues to be, because we have some of the cheapest food, or most economical food is probably the best way to say that, in the world. We have it here in the United States. And yet if we don't allow the science to actually make the decisions, and we allow all this, social media furor that you sometimes get to control the narrative and the conversation, it will not be to our benefit. And it will cost us more money. It will make it so our food gets off we have two choices. We can either grow our food in this country and make sure that we do it in the best, safest way possible, or we will end up offshoring our food. And I think Europeans know what this was like because during World War II, they had food shortages, right? And it was because they quit growing their food at home and they, those kind of things. But we can have a very safe, very reliable food source. And even during COVID, it may have been an inconvenience, but the reality is Americans were not starving. We had food. It was a matter of having those channels to get it out to the people.
I think about that even too. Like, I know we had, when I was growing up, we always grew a family garden.
Yes,
right?
Always. Yeah, everybody did.
Yeah, like and homegrown vegetables are the best. Like, even if you don't like carrots, I feel like you gotta love garden carrots and garden cucumbers, and I don't know, supporting that lifestyle. Like you said, it brings you back to your roots and kind of like refocuses your like, and you feel more independent too. I don't know. There's just a beauty about connecting with the land and knowing where your food comes from and being part of the process, even if it's in a small way.
I absolutely agree with that. My husband, he has to go out and dig in the dirt, and I go out and dig in the dirt in my yard and in my garden and in my, my little orchard of things. One of the things they say that's one of the best things for your mental health is to go out and dig dirt and get that dirt under your fingernails and just get out there and feel the, feel the leaves and look at the growth and the excitement that it brings to see, oh, this little plant is now getting bigger and bigger, right?
Yep.
I mean, it really does a lot for people. And, I think people have forgotten what makes this so great. And that is part of this being tied to agriculture, being tied to the land, being tied to your little communities is really what I think makes people most happy and brings the most joy in their life.
What are ways that like we as the general public can do better to support local farmers?
Well, I think this was interesting. And as I've thought about this question, I look back in the last 2 years, and I have to say that the community here in our area has been phenomenal. When our area was facing a huge shutdown of most of the acres of groundwater right acres in our area, our communities and our area became very involved in that, and they were very vocal. They were making calls. I mean, it was making news everywhere, every day, all the time. And I just can't say thank you enough to the community around here as I watch them rally around that. And I think as we move forward, if we will remember that it's good for all of us to have wide open spaces around our cities and things. It's great for kids to go out and see that. Take them out. Let them see what's going on. Let them see how the plants are growing. No farmer's going to care if you go stand to the side of their field and dig in the dirt and see what's going on. They just really won't care. They'll be grateful you're there. And part of that is just if they hear misconceptions, especially like when you're from Idaho and people might be talking bad about whatever, dairy in Idaho or potatoes in Idaho or whatever it is, or sugar beets, that people come and they stand up for it because you know what? We're standing solidly together for a good cause. And if they have questions, if they wonder how we grow our crops or they wonder how we treat our workers or what our qualifications are, by being able to communicate and have those conversations will help everybody. I think one of the huge misconceptions that's out there right now is how we treat our workers. And I don't think people realize, but like when we have to bring in, immigrants to do our jobs for part of the year for our harvest time. I mean, we have to pay for them the minute they leave their house. We have to provide for their housing and their food and everything and their travel, all of it, right? And then they're paid a really competitive wage, which it's been $16 an hour this last year. I'm not sure what it's going to be this year, but it's $16.54 an hour or something. And we have to take them to town once a week. If there's any problems with them as an employer, we're responsible for them. I mean, we try to be good neighbors in the neighborhood. And for us in our operation, like we instituted drug testing and all of those kind of things way before anybody else was doing those kind of things so that, we didn't have, when you think about it, if I have an employee that's driving a fully loaded truck, right? That's like having a bomb on the road. So
a lot can go wrong with that.
A lot could go wrong with that. And so we want to make sure that our trucks are safe, that the people that are driving our trucks are safe, that they're not aggressive drivers, those kind of things. And just to remember that we really have everyone else's best interest. As farmers, we care about the people we're serving. We care about the people we're feeding. I would never feed anybody food that I wouldn't eat myself.
Yeah.
I think that's the big takeaway. We all want to do a good job so that you all have very safe, very reliable food for the most economical price.
What do you love about being part of the agriculture community?
Over the years, I have had different experiences within the agricultural community. And the one thing that I have always found is when it comes down to it, we all really want the same things. And I've watched people help other people, their neighbors. One of the most touching times I can remember was here in, I believe it was like 2018 or 2019, when we saw on about a Thursday that we were going to have record cold temperatures by Monday, Tuesday night. And I remember calling my husband and I'm saying, honey, I think we're going to have to work Sunday. I think we're going to have to try and work as many hours as we can without the cold shutting us down. And my husband's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to work a Sunday. And I was like, I think we're going to need to. And he said, nope. And then his people came to him and they said, we're working Sunday. So you can stay home, but we're working Sunday. And then what we had happen was we had all these great people from our community that knew us, never really spent a lot of time on the farms or anything, but they called us and they're like, hey, can I come out and drive a truck? Can I come out and pick clods? What can I do to help you? And because of that, we were actually able to get our crop out. I think it was about 3:00 in the morning on a Tuesday morning, and we'd gone like almost no sleep. And I never drive truck. Just as a rule, I never drive truck. That's not what I want to do, or a tractor. But that year for 2 or 3 days, I did. And so we finished at 3:00 in the morning. We realized our neighbor, which was probably the majority of his crop, was not going to get his crop out. And so as we finished at 3, we went over and got every truck we had and we filled it up, but we had to take it into our shop because he couldn't unload it into his cellar that night. So got home at like 4 in the morning. My sons got out there at 7. They were able to change the unloading system like we talked about earlier. Got a big unloading system and a generator there so it wouldn't pop the breakers. And they went and unloaded all those trucks that they'd had in our cellar. And from 8, 9 o'clock that morning, they were able to work. And by 5 or 6 o'clock that night, they got all of his crops in. And probably within a few hours later that night, that was the end. Any potatoes that hadn't got in were done. And at the same time, we had another neighbor that called us and he's like, oh my heavens, I realized I forgot a whole field. And my husband's like, no problem. You can pull into our cellar that's closest to your fields. We'll just pull forward. We got any trucks, unloading equipment, harvesting equipment, anything you need. We had a farmer from Blackfoot that a manager of ours knew, and he knew that they needed help. And so we just took drivers and trucks. And I think that's the beauty of the farm, of the farming community, is that when they have a neighbor in need or they have a situation, they all pull together. And to watch that and watch our entire communities come around. And I think that's been the great thing about our farm community here in Idaho Falls and in eastern Idaho here. Anytime you've seen a need, or if we had somebody that had to have a kidney transplant right in the middle of harvest, and 4 or 5 different farmers went in there and within a matter of hours had all of his grain cut and put in his grain bins and taken care of.
Wow.
And so it's that community and that reaching out and caring about who's next to us, who's our neighbor, and how can we help make our community a better place. That is why I am grateful every day I am a farmer.
That's awesome.
Thank
It really
you.
is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Makes me proud of my ancestors. I've got a couple that are, I am not part of the ag community, but I appreciate the people who came before me and who were and built it up, and the people that carry on that great tradition of taking care of their neighbors and taking care of our country with food and I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I
think we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
And even to get agriculture to where we are today, every one of us ancestors most likely participated in that.
Mm-hmm. Now, we may not all be a part of it still, but because of the sacrifice and the hard work and the ingenuity and trying to figure out how to get it a little bit better every day, we've taken it from where they would harvest, literally dig up the potatoes on the ground, put them in a basket, then somebody would come by and put them in a burlap sack, and then somebody else would tie them up, and then they would hand load those onto a transport truck and then take them to a cellar and then unload them. I mean, when you think about, we all stand on the shoulders of giants because of all these great people that have come and sacrificed. And I mean, our ancestors, those who were in agriculture in the 30s and 40s and all, I mean, the things that they did to make it work with so very little and worked so very hard and made it a joy and made it fun so that all of us didn't quit between now and then, that we still are growing food in this country. We have to appreciate the giants, the shoulders of giants that we stand on today.
Thank you. That's perfect. I think we're good. So,
did you guys get everything you wanted?
Yeah, that was perfect.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for coming in and after your hectic day and talking to us about agriculture.
Anytime. I'm happy to talk about agriculture. Like I say, I love agriculture. It's way happier subject for me most of the time.
Love it.